Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Rajeev Singh. As CEO, Raj leads Accolade, the Seattle-based company providing millions of people and their families with an exceptional healthcare experience that is personal, data-driven, and value-based so that they can live their healthiest lives. Last month was Accolade's 6th anniversary. Congratulations. In 1993, Raj co-founded his previous company, Concur, the global leader in travel and expense management. Concur went public in 1998 and grew to more than $800 million in revenue, over 4,000 employees, and more than 25,000 customers before being acquired by SAP AG for $8.3 billion in 2014. Raj's desire to change the world extends into his personal philanthropy as well. In March 2020, as the COVID pandemic unfolded, he rallied a group of like-minded donors to launch the All in Seattle initiative that raised funds for local organizations on the front lines. Raj partnered with other Seattle area leaders to raise $10 million for Seattle for India to send crucial healthcare supplies to address the crisis. Singh graduated from Western Michigan University with a BSc. Today, he serves on the board of directors for several Seattle headquartered companies, such as Avalara, Amperity, Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation, and the University of Washington Foundation. Welcome, Raj. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Awesome.
Thank you for being on. Okay, we're going to hit you with some rapid fire. What was your very first job?
I delivered papers when I was 10, Detroit News. And then I was a busboy when I was 14.
Nice. That's like a lost job. That was so big when we were being raised, right? The whole drop off the newspapers. They don't have them anymore. It's like crazy. What are those kids doing?
No, it's like fully grown men now delivering newspapers. I don't know. I was making decent money at 10. I was bringing it home.
I love it. I know you're into music. So who's your favorite band?
Oh, I love music, and that's a really hard one because I'm all over the map in terms of my
different genres.
Taste.
Yeah,
I love hip hop music. I'm a huge J. Cole fan. I love Citizen Cope. I love The Cure. Man, I love a lot of bands.
So you've got a nice eclectic taste. I love it.
There's almost nothing I won't listen to be honest.
Well, how about country? Did you go to the Eric Church? I was like, yeah, you can have my tickets to that.
I did not go to the Eric Church concert, but I'll tell you this. I am endeavoring to become a country music fan. I think it might be a little misunderstood by music snobs like us. And so I think I'm going to try.
Okay. So if you could be famous as an athlete, musician, writer, or actor, or something else, what would you choose?
Oh, athlete for sure. Since I was a kid, I grew up in Detroit. I've always wanted to be the quarterback of the Detroit Lions and finally get them to win games and win a championship. I wanted to be the Super Bowl champion quarterback of the Detroit Lions.
It's not too late, Raj.
I figured out.
Did you play football?
I did. My dad was a first generation Indian immigrant. And so he would see me. I was this 150-pound kid playing football in Michigan. And he's like, I don't even understand what you're doing. You're never going to play professional football, which is not like a super inspiring thing to say to a 14, 15-year-old. But it did dawn on me at some point that, maybe I'm not going to be a pro quarterback.
Yeah.
I wasn't even a quarterback in high school.
You guys have 2 kids, right? 2.
One sophomore in college and a senior in high school. Yeah.
And did anyone play football? Did anyone play football? Did your son play football?
No, he plays everything else, but he did not play football, which I'm actually kind of happy about. I'm okay with it.
Well, I'm asking because I'm always curious how smart people look at football today, because there's obviously controversial. And my son's very upset that I'm not letting him play. I'm like the overprotective Jewish mother.
I probably would have let him play, Shauna. I probably would have let him play if he wanted to. But luckily for me, soccer turned out to be his game. Like, it's the game he loves. And so nice. Soccer and basketball is what he loves.
Love it. Okay. So talk to me about these past, I guess, almost 2 years during the pandemic. What's the best thing that happened to you, or something that you hope to take away from this period?
Best part is clearly family. We took our company public in the pandemic, Shauna, and that would have been 3 or 4 months on the road, gone. And I did all of that from my house, and I could sit down and have dinner with my kids every night. This was before my daughter went away to college. And so that part of the story, it's a blessing, a huge blessing for me. And it's hard to say anything's a blessing in a time of tragedy like the pandemic, but that was magic for us.
Yeah. But I think given that it is such a traumatic time for so many, I think it is important to look at some of the blessings, because there are some silver linings for some people, some key takeaways. So I always love to ask that.
I saw my mom and dad almost every day during the pandemic. I saw my mom and dad, and like that had not happened since I was a teenager. And so it was pretty cool.
I love that. Okay. So what is something that you would get up early to do? Like really early?
I do get up really early to exercise. It's the only time I can find. And so, like you, Sean, I just want to be young. I just want to stay young. And so like, I gotta get up early now.
What do you do for your workouts?
Earlier and earlier, unfortunately. Yeah. It's harder and harder to stay young. I'm a runner. And so I'll run and I'll do the mundane stuff. I'll weights. But I'm working hard and harder and harder.
I'm a huge believer in exercise, so I get it. I didn't work out yet today. Right. I think so too. Okay. What's your superpower or your special gift? It's such a cliche, stupid question, but I'm curious.
I think I can see other people's superpowers. I think I see the best in people, and it helps me put teams together. I think what I'm best at is putting teams together, and it's because I think I really do see what magic other people bring.
That's amazing. And that is a very unique skill set. Okay, this is my final rapid fire, and we're getting into it. Tell me about an interest or a hobby that you haven't yet pursued.
Oh my God.
So many, right?
So many. I would love, I don't think this is ever going to happen, Shauna, but I would love to learn how to play an instrument. The guitar, mostly. That's what I'd love to learn how to do, because it'd be cool, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I think it's easier today than ever before because of all these apps. My husband's a guitarist, and several people that I've asked that question to on this podcast have had the same answer. Everybody wants to play the guitar. That seems like something you could absolutely do. So anyway, so you grew up in Michigan. You said Detroit. Are you into Eminem?
Of course. I'm, as I mentioned, a hip hop fan. And so Eminem is a part of the story. There's a lot of great hip hop out of Detroit. Big Sean's from Detroit. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of Detroit. But yes, I grew up all over the state of Michigan, both in a small town called Kalamazoo and around Detroit.
Yeah. And so you said your parents are first generation, or you're first generation?
My dad came over from India to pursue his education in college. And my mom came over a few years later. So he left his wife and two children behind, my older brother and sister, in India while he found a place to live, found an education. Like about 3 years later, he brought his wife and two children over. And then I was born here in the States.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so when you think about your childhood, how much of being a family from India, I guess, defined how you saw yourself in the context of the rest of the world? What was, I guess, the population like in Detroit?
Oh, definitively. I mean, I was an Indian kid first because my parents were different than everybody else in our neighborhood. And so we were, if you think about the incredible risk that a man who barely has any money takes when he leaves his country, leaves his wife and kids behind and goes to a new place to live, that's pretty massive. And that defines him and his life. And that's my dad. And so we got to the United States, and by the time I was born, we were living in a tiny little house in a part of Detroit that you wouldn't really go to today. And for us, my parents were hell bent on being Indian. They a lot of first generation immigrants, Shauna, have this guilt complex about leaving where they're from, and they want their kids to be as Indian as they would have been if they were still being raised in India. And my parents had that going for a while. They were super strict, really uptight parents. And, my mom's wearing saris. My dad's like super proud of his heritage. Both of them were really thick accents. And so it was definitional for us as kids. We were Indian kids, and it was pretty clear to the neighborhood that was true. Mm-hmm. And all of us as kids responded to that differently.
Well, the reason why I ask it is because I'm slightly obsessed with culture and just different people's cultures. I married a Persian Jewish man, and the culture is so strong, and I'm always like, And all of his cousins and all the different relatives have had different ways of identifying and different ways of keeping the culture alive or assimilating. And also just today, there's so much hate that I'm always curious. And I think it's really important to keep these stories alive and people's heritage stories alive and stories of origin.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Shauna. I think for us, if you're an immigrant family, we moved a lot because when my dad got a better job, he could afford a better house in a public school district that was better, and education was everything. And so we would move. We moved probably 6 or 7 times, but from the time I was kindergarten to the time I graduated from high school, which meant, you're back then, Sean, back in the Stone Ages, right? You leave a neighborhood and you never see those kids again. And so you're moving into.
Yeah, there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram.
Yeah, totally. You're not keeping in touch, right? And so you move and you start all over, even though it was moving around Michigan. And so there was, I was not the most popular kid in school a lot of times because you're showing up as this new kid. It's different in towns that don't always love different. But it was, it was miserable many times, but to me, it first led to me running from my heritage. I just wanted to be like everybody else. I didn't want to be Indian. I came back to it and I realized okay, well, this is who I am. And I need to embrace it because otherwise you're sort of empty. And I didn't realize that until probably college, to be honest with you.
Your 5th grade friends, whoever they are, wherever they are, what would they have said if they could see where you are today? Would they be like, oh, obviously that kid would have gone on to be successful? Or like, no, he was kind of like a jokester? Like, who were you in 5th grade?
I was pretty serious in 5th grade because I had Indian parents who were like on me. My friends in college would be, and I talk to many of them now, would be shocked and are shocked by, I was not the most serious student for the first couple of years of college. And so you go through these waves, but
well, you had the strict Indian parents. You had to let it rip in college.
And I did. Trust me.
That's great.
I let it rip.
So from the outside, because I know you peripherally, and we have a lot of people that, you're a very influential person in the tech world, I would say, for sure. And I see you as a few things that I would define. Obviously, you're great at putting together teams, which is something that I'm glad you recognize. You've done so many deals. Like, you're a deal guy, which it sounds a little, I'm not saying it in a sleazy way, but you're great at putting together deals, it seems. I'm curious, what's the first deal you ever did that made you be like, oh my gosh, I did that, or I got a higher juice out of that?
I think I look back to my life at Concur, which is my first company, the first company I was a part of that I co-founded with my brother and Mike Hilton. And, at that stage of your life, you're 23, 24 years old. You don't know anything. I remember the first time I sat in a room and we were working on a deal with Citibank, and Citibank is like, $200 billion company. And the CFO of Citibank came into the room. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm talking to the CFO of Citibank, which sounds kind of geeky right now, but I'm telling you, I'm like a student of business. This guy walks in and I'm like, this guy's a big shot. And you know what was the best part about that? He left. And it was the first time I had the realization. We ended up doing a deal with Citibank, but he left. And I remember flying home and writing a note to somebody saying, that dude is just like the rest of us. Like,
exactly.
We can run with all these guys. Like, you read about these people in the New York Times, and it turns out
they all put their pants on like everyone else. Absolutely. That's how I feel with you. I'm like, I'm talking to Raj Singh.
Oh, shut up.
It's true. Okay. So these are 2 other things. I just have these, 3 other. I have a feeling that you're very good at inspiring others to not just put together the teams, but to let them flourish and to bring out the best. I guess that's a leadership skill. When did you realize that you had leadership skills, or when did they first start showing up? Like, was it on the playground, or was it in college?
You know what's interesting, Shauna? I was never the best player on any of my sports teams. I don't think I've ever talked about this before. I was never the best player on any of those teams. But I was often the kid who people would listen to. And I think I like to think now, I have no idea why that was true then. I like to think now it's because I actually do genuinely care about those other people. And I'm super competitive. I want to win, but I actually genuinely give a damn about the people around me. And I think people actually gravitate towards people who care. And
well, right. It's like you see it as like their wins or your wins versus their wins or your losses. Like it's competitive, but in like we all rise together, not like you're going to win. That means me a loser. Yeah.
And I think that's the essence of every great team. The essence of every great team is like people pitching in for each other. And I like, I'm hopeful that that's me.
Yeah. I see another theme in you, which is that you are an incredible community leader, philanthropist. I think some of those are values that are instilled probably by your parents, I'm guessing. Or where did you learn that like it's important to give back to your community?
Certainly my parents, my mom and dad, actually, when I graduated from college, decided they were going to go back to India. So, they came to the United States, spent 20 something years here, and went back to the village where they were born, which is not comfortable, by the way. Like it's in the middle of India in a state called UP, Uttar Pradesh. And they opened a school there for girls because the girls in that village didn't get educated. Because oftentimes by age 10 or 11, the parents would bring them back to work on the farms. They were worried about teenage pregnancy, all of that. So they pulled them out of the schools. My parents went and like literally went door to door in this village saying, we're going to open a girls' school and you're going to send your kid here and you can trust that we're going to look out for them. They started with like 5 kids or 6 kids. And now there's 800 girls who are graduating from this
school. Oh my
school.
Gosh. That's incredible. Yeah. I'm assuming you've been. Sure. Have you been there?
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine?
No, can you imagine if you hadn't? But I'm just saying, like, when you get there, I guess what emotions come over you? You must be so proud to be associated with your family.
You have to be in awe of those two. I'm in awe of those two. And if you think a Jewish mother is tough, try a Hindu mother, like not showing up to her school, she'd have killed her.
Well, and when I say have you been, that's kind of obvious that you would have been. But I mean, like, at what stage did you go? When there were 6 kids or 800 kids? Did you start there early?
First time we went, we brought the kids. And so now the kids are like going to college. They were like 4 or 5. And that was the first time we went. We brought the kids into India and they got a chance to see like 100 kids going to school. And for my kids, it was super eye-opening. Like, hey, these kids are fighting to go to school. They're battling. They have to fight their parents to get to school.
Yeah.
And so, all of that for me comes from them. Look at like they're 78 and 77. The pandemic hit. All of their kids here, my sister and brother, were like, we got to get you the hell out of India. We got them out of India. They came back, got their first shot, their 2 shots, went back. Then the pandemic like racked through India again. We got them out again. And then they got their booster and they went back. They're like this.
So passionate. That's their passion. That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's an incredible story. Okay. We got to get on, but I have so many questions for you. I'm also, the fourth thing that I see in you, that's clear now where you get this from is just, how much pride you take in being a good father, a good husband, that is your top priority, your family. And I think sometimes people are trying to kind of run away from their own childhoods. And it sounds like the opposite. You're like, no, I want to try to emulate in some way.
I think we all find things that our parents did that we don't want to do. And that's true for me too. My parents were like hovering, like overprotective parents. And I try not to do that with my kids. But yeah, Shauna, like I think everything good in my life comes from my family. Like it comes out of that. And it doesn't mean that I don't have like a whole bunch of other things outside of my family, but I think my strength comes from the foundation of my wife, my kids, my mom and dad, like my family. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
So you got to nurture that. Like if you nurture that, I found it just took me a while to figure out that you got to nurture that. And then all the other goodness, like all the other fun comes from that. And that's like a life that I understand right now.
Super important message. So you said you were kind of just like messing around those first couple of years, Western Michigan University. Is that right?
So I went to another school.
Yeah, I saw that.
Dropped out and then ended up there. Yeah,
I saw that. That actually makes me happy because I think we're talking about these hovering parents and I've obviously got 3 kids that are teenagers and it's hard not to be like, well, you got to make the best decision and go to the best school because opportunity comes from there. And you're like, when then you see Raj saying, well, I dropped out. Then I went to this other school, kind of messed around. Like at what point did you realize that you wanted to pursue a career in technology? It was early days. I mean, tech was kind of like, what is that? Ish.
It was early. I mean, I was lucky. Actually, 2 things happened. One, like I started school and my dad wanted me to be an engineer. I didn't want to be an engineer. And so I decided to rebel against my dad. And I realized somewhere in there, like, oh, wait, this is my life that I'm screwing up if I keep this up. And so, but my brother is 7 years older than me, and he went straight to California. He also dropped out of school, went straight to California and discovered like this place that was this magical place, San Francisco, that was blowing up with new technology companies. I went to see him when I was in college, and I realized like these people were different, and they weren't different in terms of like being better or worse. They were just different. Like they were like these believers that, hey, we can build stuff that changes the world. And I'd never been around people like that. And I just thought, whatever they're having, I want to have that. And that changed my life. And so he, in many respects, his courage to go west gave me the exposure that drew me to the West as well.
And so I don't know if you listen to the podcast or if you listen to podcasts, but I love the podcast, How I Built This. And they just talk about those early days of like, how did you even come up with the idea? Like if we were there in a fly on the wall with you and your brother and your partners, what's the conversation? Oh, hey, do you have an idea? And then you come up with the team, or you have the team and you're like, now let's try to find something to build. Like, how does this happen?
It was more the latter than the former. I think Steve and Mike were working together on a different company that was selling a lot of software to salespeople, and salespeople kept complaining about expense reports, which is where Concur started. And then
I remember those days because we used Concur. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we decided we were going to do that. And honestly, there was a lot of conversation like, really, are we going to work on expense reports? Is that what we're doing? Because it's not very sexy.
Well, you're solving a problem, and not a sexy problem, but a problem, which makes it sexy. Right. A lot of people want it to be solved. So that makes it sexy.
Yeah. And so it was more, we had some guys and we wanted to work on something. And it was really, Steve and Mike were way further ahead in their lives. Like Steve was like 30 and Mike was 28. I was coming out of school. And so I was along for the ride, to be honest, at the outset, and hopefully contributed a little bit more later down the road.
And so what were your roles early on? Did you define those, or was it like your typical startup where it's like just, drinking from the fire hose?
It was like a revolving chairs, actually. Mike was the CEO to start. Steve was participating as an investor, but was working somewhere else because we needed money. And I actually wrote the first prototype of the application. Like I was the product manager. Steve eventually joined as CEO, and eventually I became, I think like a number of years later, I became the president of the company. And so like we moved around a bit between the roles, but it was just because the company evolved and we evolved as humans.
Yeah. Like Steve funded it out of the gate. It's like self-funded.
Steve and Mike funded it out of the gate, out of their own pocketbook. I didn't have a pocketbook at the time. And so
you're like, I'm just a dude out of college. Yeah, I get it. And so what was the business model? How were you planning to make money? Like charge people per seat?
A long time ago, you're going to make fun of me now, Shauna. So like, just hold your tongue.
I should probably know this. I prefer to not over prepare for these podcasts, even though you're probably, I answered this on 50 interviews. You should know this.
No. We were selling software in boxes. Like, do you remember Egghead software and
Copy USA? I'm old school. I get it.
Yeah. So we were selling in boxes, and then fortunately for us, because that wasn't going to work long term. I mean, it got us off the ground, but it wasn't going to work long term. Along came the internet in 1996, 1997. And that was when we really started like, oh, okay, there's a new way to do this, and we got to get to that. And the good part of that story is we had the courage to just ditch our old business model and go.
And so who was the very first like big hire that you made, and how did you convince them to get on this train?
We had a bunch of people that we came on like from, we were sitting in the first, this is a good story, Sean. But first time we put like ads out for engineers, we were still in my apartment. It was Mike and me in my apartment. We worked in the apartment. So that was the only address we could put on the ad. And some industrious young man decided like, he's just going to go to the office and hand his resume to the hiring manager. And it was my apartment. It was like 8:00 in the morning on a Monday, which when you're 23 years old, working until 1:00 in the morning, you're not all put together at 8:00. I opened the door. The guy hands me his resume. He's like, I don't think I want to work here. Anyway, we did end up hiring a bunch of really smart people from schools like MIT, et cetera, that were a part of our story.
So that's hilarious. So the guy shows up and he's just like, hands you the resume, you're in your apartment making your eggs.
I'm literally in boxers and a t-shirt, and I'm kind of like, wait, what do you want? And he hands me his resume. We did not hire that guy.
Did not. Well, it's very industrious. I like it.
We ended up bringing people in with the idea that there was something big here that we believed in. And then we started finding people who were executives at other companies. Honestly, some of those hires didn't really work out really well for us, Shauna, because we went a little too big, a little too fast.
Yeah. It's a constant struggle for people when I'm dealing with clients that are in startups and they're like, we want this big person out of like Microsoft. I'm like, well, I don't know. You got to look at all these things and kind of try to not overhire too early. That totally makes sense.
I agree. You got to find people who still want to do the work, not just tell people what work to do, depending upon the stage of your business.
Totally. So who was your very first big customer, and who was your first customer to kind of re-sign on? Because obviously everyone can get a big customer, and then when they actually like double down, that's when you know.
The same customer, Monsanto, was our first customer. And here's the quick story. They were coming to our offices. We only had like 20 people in the office, and they thought we were bigger than we were. And so we had maybe 30 people, maybe. And a lot of times people were not showing up until like 10 or 11 o'clock. Because again, they worked all night. It was mostly engineers. And so we had to tell the engineers like, hey, Monsanto's coming to visit. You got to wear like normal clothes and you have to show up to the office.
Make us look a little bit legit.
Yeah, totally. Like, no, like don't come in flip flops and shorts. Like you got to wear normal clothes and you got to show up by 8 just this one day. And we crossed our fingers and it happened. And so we signed that customer. That was our first corporate customer. And then things kind of took off from there, Shauna. We got lucky and caught a little wave.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to talk about with Concur. I'm curious if you could highlight a few of the key takeaways as far as learnings that helped you as you launched Accolade. And also just maybe, I'm sure you mentor some people and give advice. Like, what are some of the key takeaways from your experience of 20 plus years?
From Concur? Well, Concur had ups and downs, Shauna. It went up and then it crashed. In 2000, it crashed and our stock traded below $1 for like a year or two. And so there was some down periods, some really down periods, but I would say it ended on an up note, and the big takeaways were you have to have some courage behind your convictions. You're going to have to bet your company more than once if you really want to grow something material. And those bets are scary, but either you have the courage or you don't, and you're going to have courage behind your convictions and believe in things. The second is culture, people, values. Like it's all that. It's everything. It's everything. And if you lose sight of that, your business will deteriorate either quickly or slowly, but it will deteriorate. And I think the last for us was you have to build a core of people who believe, like a core of a team, and that team has to stick together, and you got to show faith in each other through some really difficult times. I think you do those things, and set 2 and 3 are obviously correlated, but you do those things, you got a shot. Like no one's guaranteed victory, but you got a shot.
And how important is it to you, if you're giving advice to a young entrepreneur, to think about who to partner with as far as investors and how to choose a board?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And I don't think people really understand it, especially first time, second time entrepreneurs, even second time, but first time entrepreneurs. You need capital, and it can be so, it is a bruising process going to ask people for money, and everyone's super friendly and wants to meet you, talks it up and then says no.
Or they keep you just warm enough to see what other people are going to do.
Exactly. So everyone feels, oh my God, this is a great idea. It's a great idea until they don't give you the money. And that process is so hard on entrepreneurs who believe so much in their idea that they grab the first dollar that comes in. And that can be really dangerous. Like you really have to vet your investors just like you would vet your head of sales. Like it has to be the right fit. And so building that list of what the right fit is important. And then vetting is even harder. It's harder with investors because most investors say the right.
Well, maybe just talking to some of the other entrepreneurs that they've invested in to be like, how were they in the down times? Did they stand by you, and did you feel like scared to take their call, or was it your partner that was like, hey, let's go solve this?
That's 100% the point. That's 100% the point. Can they tell you the truth, but can they do so in a way that says they're on your team, like they're that they're in the boat with you, as opposed to as opposed to hovering over in the helicopter saying you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Interesting. And I'm sure some of those relationships, when you went back, did you ever go back to some of the same people who said no to Concur when you were raising money for Accolade?
I didn't, but
I feel like I'd be like, you don't even get a chance to talk to me.
I can tell you this. I know, I remember, I can tell you the names of everybody who turned me down at Accolade.
Of course.
For sure. And I will never say to them aloud, but I'll tell you this for a fact. I think about those people all the time. It kind of gives me a little fire.
Yeah. I do love hearing that from entrepreneurs when they talk about either, doubt kind of fueled them. Like, I'm going to prove you wrong, or somebody who's like, I've always known that you have it in you. It almost seems that it's better juice to have somebody doubt you. It seems that seems to inspire a lot of entrepreneurs. Most that I've talked to have said, it's like, screw you. I'm going to show you.
Especially the ones who said like, hey, I'd fund anything you do and then didn't fund. Those guys, I remember. And it totally fuels me. It absolutely fuels me.
Yeah. So weren't people mostly thinking you were going to kind of chill for a little bit after Concur? And then I remember just all of a sudden it was like everywhere. I was like, Accolade, here he goes again. Like, they're off to the races. How much time did you take, and how did you decide that you wanted to go at this thing again and in a big way?
It took 9 months, Shauna. It took 9 months. I had some fun with my family, but I was studying. I knew right away. I knew immediately upon leaving Concur that I was going to do something, and probably not for all the right reasons. I think I've matured a little. It's been 7 years since I left Concur, 6 years at Accolade now. But some of those reasons were like, so much of my identity was tied up in being an entrepreneur who was running something that I didn't know how to fill that hole. And I felt like it had to be another company. Like, I just had to go do that. That's who I was.
But also, what else would it have been? Seriously. I mean, it didn't have to be at this magnitude, at this level, but I don't think you could really half-ass things. Sounds like that's not your DNA.
It's definitely not. But I probably should have taken a little more time. Honestly, when I give people advice, I say, like, you got to remember, understand your why better. And my why was a little off kilter. Mm-hmm. But it's worked out, meaning I found my why through the
What's
process.
your why today? I mean, your why, you're changing the world. Not to say that expense reports don't, but Accolade is a whole nother level. I mean, you're solving a very real problem. Some of the facts I saw on the website talking about how many Americans, 65 million Americans, don't have easy access to primary care physicians. Like, I was shocked to read that. And it says 1 in 3 adults lack a primary care physician. Like, these are things that we don't have to consider, but they're real. And then it says on average, it takes 24 days to schedule an appointment with a primary care physician.
It's crazy, Shauna. And right now, so primary care is one example of that. If you live in an inner city or if you live in a rural community, it's worse than those numbers. It's worse. And if you have a job that's, hourly, that you don't get paid time off, you're making a choice as to when you can. So now finding a primary care physician who sees patients after 5 o'clock, who's on your bus route,
right? Like,
that whole thing, it just gets really, really complicated. So I think good news, the cloud gives us an opportunity to say, well, I can deliver primary care virtually. And before COVID, everybody thought, no way, that can't be done. And post-COVID, everybody understands it can be done, and it can be done at scale. And so we can solve these problems. We can solve the primary care problem. We can solve the mental health problem. Right? Like, finding a mental health specialist in any place right now, it doesn't matter inner city or rural or just in Seattle, finding a mental health professional who's seeing patients, you can't do it. But we have to rip down some rules too. But we can talk about that later. But we have to rip down some silly rules that don't make sense in this country in order to make that happen. But yeah, like, this is, to me, like, my why now is, this is a broken system.
It's such a broken system.
It's my last job, and let's take a run. Like, let's take a hard run at fixing something big.
Yeah. And did you ever think that you were going to go directly to consumers? Or, like, if somebody doesn't have a company that's using Accolade, how do they access your services?
You can get to it right now. There's a site called plushcare.com where you can get to our primary care physicians. And there'll be a site eventually that has the Accolade brand on it. But we bought a company in the direct-to-consumer space called PlushCare that is doing exactly that: mental health and primary care, direct-to-consumer. You pay a subscription and you can get to that doctor anytime you want. And we're hiring docs from the top 50 med schools. They stay with you forever, meaning they're really primary care docs. They're not urgent care docs like a lot of other telemedicine solutions are. And you just get a better experience. And so,
and how do you attract them? How do you attract the doctors? What's in it for them?
Oh man,
it seems like it's a much better model.
It's so much better for these guys. Like primary care in most countries. Well, I'm going to geek out on you a little bit.
I love this. I'm learning.
In most developed countries in the world, they spend 15% of total healthcare costs on primary care. In the United States, we spend 7 or 8%. You want to know why? Because the real money is in specialty care. That's where everyone wants to go, because we have a for-profit healthcare system that makes money the more procedures we deliver. And so while the rest of the world is putting more into preventative care, primary care, getting people the care that they need before they get ill, we're doubling down on specialty care. And so primary care physicians are overworked. They hate their jobs. If you were to think about the employee engagement scores for primary care physicians at the health systems where they work, they're really, really low. But think about if you went to med school, went $100,000 into debt to go help people. That's why you went to med school. And then you got shoved into a job where you were told you got to see 20 patients. You get 14 minutes a patient.
Yeah.
And we don't care if you can follow up with them or not. Like, those people want a better job. And so we're not having a hard time hiring, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And so what's the exact business model? How does the company make money?
For about 170 million people in the country, your employer pays for your healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your deductible, but they're paying the remainder of those costs. We go to those employers and say, our service we're basically going to give every employee and their families a primary care doc, a mental health specialist, and a care team that runs down. Like, once you get into the healthcare system, the bills, the benefits, all of that stuff are a nightmare. We'll run down all of that stuff for you. And when we do it, your people are going to be healthier. And this magical thing happens when your people get healthier and they're happier, your healthcare costs come down.
Mm-hmm.
And so for employers right now, this is the joy of where we sit in our journey. It's a full employment environment. If you want to attract employees, you better do something different.
Oh, I get asked this all the time. It's like, how are you going to get them? And a lot of people make their choices based on benefits. And sometimes they don't even understand it. And it seems like Accolade's helping with that too. People have no clue what's even available to them.
That's the business model. The business model is we'll lower your costs while making your employees. But honestly, Shauna, if you were to dumb it down even like to the simplest idea, rich people in this country get concierge medicine and they pay $30,000 or $40,000 a year for it. What if we could give that idea in a virtual form way more affordably while lowering costs to every employee in your family, every employee in their family in your company, and people are getting it. And so it's a business model in part certainly enabled by the pandemic in making it more understandable. But I think healthcare is going to change that way. And these like giant facilities, I'm pointing out the window here in Seattle, that have been built over the last 20 or 30 years. People don't want to go there anymore.
Yeah.
They want healthcare virtually. They want healthcare in their home.
And they want it quickly.
Exactly. Convenient.
Yeah. And so this might be a really dumb question, but do you stick with the same doctor, or it's like telemedicine, like who's available in this strong
network? You stay with the same doc. Now,
okay.
But just like in a regular.
Yeah, like my guy's off, this person's on call.
He's off for a week.
Yeah.
You get another guy on the team who has all of the data. The part of our business that's unique is we're gathering all your insurance claims data, all your electronic medical record data. So everything is on your app, available to you. You can see all your previous history. But more importantly, you walk into your doc and she knows every condition you're facing, every other doc you've seen, every medication you're on. She doesn't have to ask you any of those questions because we've gathered the data for you. It just allows, and to also know like the benefits your company provides. And so if your company has a weight loss program, cool. She can prescribe it for you and get you registered in it. Like all of those things, primary care docs in a health system can't do.
Well, I'm curious. I think we have 20 internal employees and a bunch of contractors out. So about 100 employees. Like, is there a minimum size company that's your target customer?
We're going to get to you, Shauna. We're going to get to you. Like we're going to get to a 20-person company, or you're going to get to me, because I think about our smallest customer right now is about 100 employees. But we will piece by piece. We started only selling to large corporations 6 or 7 years ago. we're getting to smaller and smaller businesses, and smaller businesses have the same problem. Like you know this better than probably I do. Healthcare costs go up on you, and you're like, there's very little you can do.
Well, and the costs are going up. And then I also want to keep my people. So I'm increasing, like we went from covering 75% to now we cover 100% because I need to make sure that my people don't get, picked off by Amazon or Accolade. I'm just kidding. So I want to, we've got great people and I need to do what I need to do as a small business owner to keep them. Another part, just switching gears a little bit, you guys are a real leader in the space. I recruit for a lot of different technology companies. I don't see people coming out of Accolade. I don't see losing people. And I usually can kind of see trends of like, oh, there's a mass exodus. No, but for real, you've built an amazing company. I love Britt. I've known her for years. And I think she's done a great job building out your people part of the business. At what stage did you realize how important diversity and inclusion is in your kind of approach to recruiting?
I wish I could say I knew that from the outset, and I didn't. I think we understood how intentional you had to be about that later in our journey at Concur. Meaning, of course, we believed in these principles, but believing in them isn't enough. You have to apply them, and you have to tangibly operationalize them. Mm-hmm. I think, fortunately for me, when we started at Accolade, I was 47 and had some experience and realized like, okay, good intentions aren't enough. You actually have to put structure in place. And then I think you've got to put, and you mentioned Britt, you have to put professional human resource capacity, or we call it people and culture capacity in place that can teach your business about its importance. It's in part about what the operational structure is around DE&I, but it's also about training every operating manager in your company about why this matters, why it's good for their business, why it's going to improve their teams and their performance. And good news part of that story, Shauna, for me, like if you look, when I joined Accolade, I had 10 like white, over 60, over 70 in some cases, men on my board. Today, I've got a 9-person board with 4 women, a lot more diversity of every ilk. And it's a way better board. There's nothing wrong with those 10 guys, by the way, they were great. But this board gives me more value, more input, and helps guide the business in a way that's way, way better. Diversity in those rooms matters a huge, huge amount. And I can tell you personally, I've experienced it. It's not talk.
Yeah. Well, I think when people think about it and they don't understand it, they're thinking about it from a perspective of like box checking, like, oh, good, we've got diversity, but we're actually, now you're living it. So you're seeing that it doesn't matter what color your skin is or what gender you are. I'm getting diversity of thought. And those things come from the fact that there's diversity of skin color and gender. And so it's just like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way or that perspective, which I think is super interesting.
I couldn't agree more. It's when you read something that you didn't know, like when you read a book, I love reading. Like you read a book about something you had no idea about. It's like so hydrating for your brain. You're like, this is awesome. I had no idea about any of this. Yeah. I think that's the same thing about perspective, man. You hear people talk and you realize like, oh, I didn't even see that angle. It was a total blind spot for me. And that to me is hydrating. Like what do you like to read, Raj? What kind of books do you like to read? I read a lot of business. Like right now I'm plowing through slowly but surely. Daniel Kahneman, who's like a Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist, wrote a book called Noise, which is really, the joy of being a CEO, Shauna, is when you read a book, you can be like, hey, you guys all got to read this with me. Cause like we should apply some of this. This book is about, there's bias in decision-making for sure. But a lot of our decisions are also impacted by the noise around us. And so you could have 2 different judges seeing exactly the same defendant and their sentencing could be wildly different. Or, and this is obviously relevant to me, 2 different doctors seeing exactly the same patient come up with 2 totally different diagnoses. It's not always about bias. Sometimes it's about noise and sort of understanding what the noise is. Like that's
interesting. Just how to cut through it, I guess.
Correct. And so I read books like this, to me, they're all about like, hey, how do I apply this to my interview process? How do I apply this to because interviews are the same story. how do we apply this to, like, how do we implement that in our software so our doctors aren't impacted by it? Like,
yeah. You got the growth mindset. It's awesome because sometimes people are like, I have it all figured out. Look at me. I did Concur and now I'm doing Accolade, and you've obviously had tremendous success, but you have the recognition that like there's so much to learn and so many perspectives to hear. And I love that. Yeah. Tell me real quickly about Evolve.
Evolve was our customer conference. We did this, we do a customer conference every year. I desperately wanted to do that in person. We had it all lined up in Arizona, and then Delta variant came and we had to shut it down. So we did it virtually. And it was, for us, we were unveiling a new category. We'd just done some acquisitions. We wanted the world to know we're a bigger, broader story than we were before. Yeah. We did that. Then we had some fun. It would have been more fun in person, but we had some fun. I got a chance to interview Andre Agassi. I
went to school with Andre. I went to boarding school for tennis in 8th grade, and he was
you were at the Bradenton Academy?
Yeah. Well, no, it was in the town called Bradenton, but it was Bolletary. Yeah.
Bolletary. Okay. Yeah. So you're a serious tennis player, Sean.
I was. I played in college, Pac-10, but I don't play anymore. I like to play ping pong, and I like to play pickleball, and I will play tennis. I'm going to play some tennis soon. But so you've got these different companies that you've partnered with. I read like Sword Health, Carrot, Vivante, Verta, RX Savings.
Sure.
There's so many. Are there? I guess where are you going with all these partnerships? Like, are there categories that you haven't partnered with yet? And if so,
think about
who are those companies?
Think about it this way, Sean. If we're doing primary care and we're like your quarterback for all things healthcare. We're your primary care, mental health. We run down all your claims and benefits issues, but there's still downstream care. And that downstream care, like, here are your big cost drivers, and here are your big impact drivers in most of these populations: diabetes management, musculoskeletal meaning hip, knee, spine. Those are the areas.
Everything hurts as you're talking right now. I'm like, yes, I have all those pains.
But and the idea is that physical therapy is an option before we get to the knife, right? You know, there's legions of data that says the majority of back surgery should never have been performed. We should not be operating on the spine as often as we do. And so the idea for us is acknowledging you're not going to fix a $4 trillion ecosystem by yourself. And so we partnered with a company called Verta in diabetes management. We partnered with a company called Sword in musculoskeletal physical therapy, but just doing it over your phone using sensors, et cetera. We partnered with a company in the RX business called the RX Savings Solutions.
I love that.
Like, the idea is we have to find like-minded partners. And maybe the big premise, Shauna, as we look at partners, is we're saying the healthcare system in the United States was built on the healthcare geek speak would be fee for service. You get paid when you deliver a service, which means if you get paid to deliver knee surgeries, fire away, do more knee surgeries. The world has to shift to a value model that says you get paid when people improve, when their clinical outcomes improve. So if A1C levels go down, if your behavioral health scores, and there's
it's so obvious there. Listening to you talk, I'm like, it's so basic and obvious. I wish we could just shake up the whole system and be like, duh.
That's the intent, right? And so we only partner with companies that believe the same thing. And if you do, that means, okay, we'll put your fees at risk. Don't get paid. And if you're going to do diabetes management, don't get paid unless A1C scores come down.
Right.
And so it's the principle that we apply with our customers, and we find partners who are really good at what they do. Like Verta's doing this incredible work where they're actually reversing diabetes. So our CMO, our chief medical officer, actually put his mother on the program. She'd been on insulin for 20 years. She's off insulin now. And so, like, I didn't know when I took this job 6 years ago that you could actually reverse type 2 diabetes that way. And so there is a bunch of innovation happening in the space. Our view is we have to find a way to mobilize it, because there's a lot of incumbents out here, Shauna. Look, most of the incumbents in the healthcare system don't want it to change because they make enormous amounts of money on it.
Of course. Well, I have a naturopathic medicine doctor, and then I have my primary care doctor. And sometimes those two are obviously at odds. My primary care doctor is like, here, take a pill. And my naturopathic medicine doctor, I'm thinking about nutrition and exercise and all these other things. It'd be awesome if it was all just under one kind of login, and I could just kind of have a topographic view of my situation, because I'm always trying to kind of hack it all.
Yeah, totally. I think, and a lot of people are like you. A lot of people are like you, saying, like, it's not just Western medicine. I want to try acupuncture. I want to try naturopathic medicine. I want to try Eastern medicine that's different. And And you ought to be able to do all those things. And by the way, the healthcare ecosystem that's paying for it should pay for that too. They should pay for these other systems, these other folks. And a lot of times what you hear from the orthodoxy is, well, that's not proven by clinical studies. Therefore, we're not going to pay for it, which is code for, I don't control it. I don't make money off of it. Therefore, I'm not going to pay for it.
Yeah. And then I'm out. And so are you doing any, this might be also a weird question, but do you do any sort of integrated partnerships with like a Fitbit or something else that's kind of like...
No, it's not a weird question at all.
We can also measure and track our behaviors?
Yeah. And so we partner with companies like LabCorp where they'll actually come to your house and draw blood, or you can go to labs that are less expensive than going to the health system. We partner with, increasingly we're partnering with, we're going to send scales into the home. We'll send blood pressure cuffs, et cetera, that kind of stuff.
Love it.
And so the idea is everything that you can do virtually without leaving your house, that's what you want to do. We could talk about return to work, Shauna, right? I'm in my office here in Seattle and I wish there was more people here, but a lot of people want to stay home.
That's where we're at. Yeah.
And healthcare is even more so. Like going to the hospital is a miserable experience. I don't care what you're going through. And whatever you can do in your house where you're comfortable and where your family is, we should be enabling that, not discouraging that.
Yeah. Well, I'm super inspired by what you're building. I mean, I have my own company, but I'm literally like, hire me. I wish that there were two of me. There's very few companies I'm like, I want to go work for that company because I'm passionate about what you're building. It's really cool.
It's, the cool part about it for us, Shauna, is like, it's the number one, the recruiting and you get this, like, you have to have something unique about yourself that's more than the money and more than the benefits program, even though we believe in the benefits program. And for us, it's like, hey, come here because you want to change the world. Like if you're a great engineer, and I'll use engineering as an example, and you want to go maximize the throughput of the shopping cart at Amazon, like, go, that's cool. Totally go do that. We think we can we tell stories every month about people's lives that we had a massive impact, up to and including saving their lives. And like, dude, you can't get that anywhere else.
From a recruiting perspective, Raj, the whole world has changed. And I've been doing this for 27 years. And these last couple of years, the sentiment around how people make decisions on their next career move have changed. I mean, it's not always, we've had people turn down, $400,000 for $200,000 based on, I get to touch the product, or I'm passionate about the project, or the product, or this team is incredible. Like, I think people are much more connected to their values through the pandemic, and they're making decisions that are completely different than they were. Recruiting's gotten turned on its head, is I guess the net. And I don't think as many people are thinking, let me go turn this widget on at Amazon. They're more thinking and especially even this next generation is even more so. I want to change the world.
Yeah, can I put in a plug for this next generation?
Yes, you can.
I think they get a bad rap. Like, I'm pro these guys.
I do. I am too. Some of my best team members are this generation.
They want to hold capitalism accountable, and they want to do shit that matters. And like, I don't know, what's wrong with that?
I think it's incredible.
Are we so skeptical that we can't believe that they want to change the world? Like,
right.
We thought that. And I still think that. I'm 53. And so I think this, all this talk about how millennials are too pristine for the world and, want things perfect is BS. Like I'm pretty fired up about this generation. I think they're bringing us good things.
Yeah. So speaking of doing good, and I'm going to let you go in a second, but I have a couple more questions. You and Jill put together an awesome group. I read about it in your intro, putting together a group of business leaders to start the All in Seattle to raise money during the pandemic. That was March 2020. You moved fast and raised more than $27 million in less than 72 hours. Like, how did you do that?
Oh boy. First of all, TJ Susan McGill, Heather Redmond, Matt McElwain, and Carol White. Like, there was a lot of people that got involved in that. Here's what happened from my view, and Jill gets way more credit than I do. Yeah. It felt like the world was coming to an end in many respects. Like, you just saw these restaurants and these bars and everything closing, and you thought, what's going to happen to those people? And so this is, I think, a joy of this town. I don't know that this happens everywhere, but I started calling everyone I knew and said, like, hey, what are we going to do? What is our plan? What are we going to do to help these people? Because we knew the government would eventually come, but the government wasn't going to come because the government just doesn't do anything fast. And so we said, okay, let's call everyone we know. And it just was like a giant phone tree, really. And then we said, like, hey, I think one thing we did do a pretty good job of, whether it was TJ or Susie or me or Jill, is people would say, like, hey, I could do this much. And we'd say, hey, the world's coming to an end. This isn't like your run of the mill crisis. And so you can probably do more. You can do more. And people bellied up. Like, people want.
Were you blown away by how much you raised? That's a lot of money. That's great. And so what's the status today? Like last year, my company, for our holiday gifts, and they hadn't done this before, but I called All in Seattle and just said, can I give this as my gift to my clients?
Oh, that's awesome.
And then they can choose because you're supporting so many different organizations, but it was a win-win. I loved it. So what's the status this year?
So here's what's happened. That thing, which had no organizational structure, it was like nightly conference calls between all these families, and us sort of cobbling together what we were going to do next and how we were going to choose the charities that we would support, et cetera. We eventually picked up and handed in a organized way to the Seattle Foundation. They turned it into All in Washington. Yeah. And so now the Seattle Foundation has put an operating infrastructure behind it. They're still really focused on delivering directly to charities, so making sure the money gets there fast. But All in Washington is All in Seattle at this point.
Yeah, that's how it was starting to transition. But I was just curious where it was like today. A perfect idea for you guys to put together the money to support all different organizations versus like, this is just the one problem we're solving. There were so many problems to solve.
We didn't know what to do. That was what ultimately we thought. Anything that took too much time, like if we had to set up our own 501c3 and distribute the money, it was months, and we just knew people were hurting that
day, right?
And like we were hearing these stories. Angela Stoll at Fair Start. Of course, we were hearing these stories about food insecurity. People in our city were starving. Like, can you imagine? And it's still happening, by the way.
Well, Angela, and then my friend Alyssa, who's actually my EO forum, she has Gourmando. They combined. They fed so many families during the pandemic. I mean, they did so much incredible work.
So many beautiful human stories of people who just put their own personal needs aside and did the work. I felt like that experience for me was like, filling for the soul,
Yeah. You got a little bucket full situation. I get that completely. So given your career and all the things that are pulling at you in a million different directions and your success that you've had, how do you make sure that you're raising your kids to have your drive and grit, given that they haven't had to want for as much as maybe you did in your generation? That is such an important question. It's one that every parent thinks about. We try to do it, for me, I'll give you the simple answer. There's a bunch of things we try to do on our day-to-day lives. But the biggest thing, Sean, like for me, a big chunk of starting at Accolade was they were old enough now, 11 and 12 at the time when I got started, or 12 and 13, to see me struggle because it was hard and I was getting my ass kicked early a lot. I'm still getting my ass kicked on some days, but they got a chance to see it, like that there's nothing easy about building things, and that I had the insecurity in these days where I would sit at the dinner table with them and say, like, I'm not sure if we're going to make it. I don't know if this is going to work. And I think sometimes I see parents who want their kids to think they got it all figured out and they know every answer. I want my kids to know I don't have all the answers. We don't know. And out there is hard, and the world's going to kick you sometimes, but you got to keep getting up. To me, the lesson is grit and resilience. And I wanted them, and I think Jill demonstrates that in different ways for them. But I wanted them to see that. I was determined to not hide any of it from them. When I was insecure and thought, "Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster," I said it. I said it out loud, and I'm hopeful that didn't. Hopefully, they were listening. So I'm curious because you're doing so much, and with the kids, and working and getting up and working out. What do you do when you just want to like completely just have fun and not be working, not be reading your business books? Like you just want to chill.
Well, I love sports. I love Seattle sports. I'm now a Kraken season ticket holder. I'm a Seahawks season ticket holder.
Full-time job on the side.
Oh my God. Yeah, it is. I love, for me, any place I can find where my friends who, you know this, Sean, like you kind of have to give up on some of your friends for a while when you're raising kids and building a business. And like, I feel like I'm finally getting back to a part of my life where I can bring this group of people who I miss dearly together. And so I spend that's where I spend my time. And I just use the football games and the soccer games and the hockey games to bring them together.
Well, I hope I get to see you. That's like a treat for me. My ultimate question for you, Raj, I'll say Rajeev for your parents.
Right on.
Is what fuels you? What's your ultimate get out of bed fuel?
I think a lot of people want to have leave a dent in the universe, Sean. Like, and I think going all the way back to that Citigroup story I told you, like when I realized like, oh, everybody's just like me, that I have a chance to do it. And I've been blessed. Like I have a lot of gifts here that a lot of people don't get. I don't want to squander that chance. And so we're going to take a swing at it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, at least I'm going to know I gave it everything I had. So
it's working.
That's what I want.